Happy Venus Day Collective. Hope everybody had a good finish to their week and is off to a good start to the weekend. And I am actually celebrating Venus Day and kind of an overcast. It was rainy a little bit earlier, but I think it's going to be clear for the most part. But it definitely has that autumn cozy in the air. So, of course, by the time the sun gets down, no matter how it felt earlier that day, that time of year to where it's definitely chilly once the sun goes away. So I am preparing one of my favorite comfort foods in my cauldron, a hearty beef stew. And as you can see back there, I've got my big vintage Dansk Dutch oven that was my grandmother's actually. And it's one of my favorite things to cook out of because, of course, it's got the witchy feel. Any big pot with a lid where you're like throwing a bunch of things that you've prepared in advance. Just so witchy in the best possible way, but like good witch gathering and foraging in the woods / her garden. And I like beef stew because it always, it's just as easy to make a large portion as it is a smaller one. So I like to send some to neighbors. And we have this nice little thing going I have with two different neighbors where we trade things. I highly encourage. I mean, I've talked about the age of community building and platonic love and exchange and showing of appreciation. And I think food is one of the best, most, timeless ways, I guess, to show love and appreciation, but also it's its own love language. I mean, of course, I'm not professing my love to my neighbors when I send them food, but I am showing them my appreciation for the richness and friendship that they bring into my life and how they show up for me, and I like to show up for them when I can. So I find that beef stew is one of those things to where nobody says no to beef stew, because the one really good thing about it is the ingredients are so simple. There's only but a few things. There's only but so many things that you have to calculate in terms of who likes this food or who likes that. Some more complex recipes you kind of have to be careful, because if someone's picky or has a restrictive diet, something's got a lot of complex features or a lot of ingredients, I have to check beforehand. But beef stew is pretty straightforward. As you can see now, I'm preparing the garlic, and I've prepared a lot of things on camera for you guys. I'm not sure I've done garlic yet. And, if you're watching this, you might think, well, who doesn't know how to prepare garlic? I'm here to tell you that actually, once upon a time, I didn't, and it was like far into like college to where I had been cooking for years. I actually first learned to cook when I was 7 from my grandma. The very first thing I learned to cook was scrambled cheese eggs. And so I had done cooking in the limited capacity that kind of the college life suggests. But anytime something called for garlic, well, I was just using the garlic powder, Lowry's garlic salt. So my grandma always used. And of course, in the age of the internet, one day I was just like, how about I look up how to prepare garlic? And it really is just, of course, quite straightforward. And one little trick, I don't know if you know this, but when working with anything kind of sticky, which very fresh garlic will be, or even if you're working with like dough or any sticky material, having your hands slightly damp, like just run it under cold water for a second, always helps. But what I'm doing right now is I'm just chopping up the little nub at the end, which it wouldn't be tragic if you didn't, especially for something like this that's going to end up going in the oven for about 2 hours. You're not even going to notice these little rough parts at the end. But what I like to do, honestly, is just kind of get them into slightly smaller pieces. And then take my larger knife, just kind of do this number. And because it is all going in this big pot, like I said, with a bunch of onions and carrots and other things, it's not too big of a deal in terms of how minced, how small and fine the mincing is here. But I wanted to talk about, here I am encouraging you to not fuss over the details of the garlic. And this is tying in specifically to this little insight I want to give on archetypes. Now, I've said that this is Venus Day, which it is, Friday. And right now, the sign of Venus is, or I'm sorry, the planet of Venus is in the sign of Virgo. And Venus is considered a personal planet because of its proximity to us. And when I say personal planet, those generally denote ones that have a stronger influence on the energies of the planet, have a stronger influence, a more noticeable influence on your day-to-day life, anything happening here on Earth than, some of the outer planets. So I want to talk about Venus in Virgo and why it's considered a sort of a non-ideal position for Virgo. I believe it's considered to be in its fall when Venus is in Virgo. But that's just because Venus is very sensual and balanced, and it's like free flowing with the creativity and love, and in its most perfect essence, you picture the goddess of love and beauty, Venus emerging from the sea, and kind of the common depictions in art and culture throughout history. But I don't know, I'm kind of partial to Venus in Virgo because Venus in Virgo is sort of no fuss. Venus in Virgo, while, if you're just trying to totally immerse in your right brain and artsy fartsy side, well, then you're going to kind of maybe trip over the details. That's why it's considered in its fall. You're going to sort of get caught in the left brain mentality. And, it's like, say, when you're decorating, I notice it with myself when I want to paint a wall, and it's important to be prepared and do logistics, but it's the overthinking myself into inaction, specifically in the creative realm, in the, artistic expression realm. I just want to overthink myself to the point where it's like, well, I've lost the point of artistic expression at a certain point, the imperfection, the sort of stop trying to categorize these feelings and scatteredness, and just kind of throw it all out there on the canvas, throw it all out there, whatever your canvas is. Stop trying to organize and get your label maker out for everything, and let the energy flow a little bit more freely. But again, when it comes to cooking, I happen to really like Venus in Virgo because I've mentioned before, preparation really is the key, the mise en place, everything in its place. And that very much is the realm of Virgo. Getting everything in order. Get it all in order. And then once it's all in order, measured out and chopped up and sort of laid out, then you can kind of really lean into the more Venus side of things and let your right brain take over. Just start throwing things in your cauldron and sit there and take in the smells, and then take your little tasting spoon out and alter the seasonings just a little bit. Sit there and let your senses just guide you and go, oh, maybe a little bit more fresh thyme, oh, maybe a little bit more fresh ground pepper, maybe a little bit more kosher salt here. But naturally, if you haven't done the preparatory work, you hadn't let Virgo have its moment, well, then that's just kind of going to get very chaotic very quickly, because you got things in the pot and here you are just trying to be vibes, but meanwhile things are cooking, the heat is having an effect, the energy on the food that's in there, and before you know it, you're vibing your way in one little area, and you've forgotten, like, you didn't even prepare your garlic and onions, you forgot to even take the meat out and put some salt and pepper on it. And so the first step, if you really want to get good at cooking, which really means you read, getting good at cooking is you read, and you read the recipe from beginning to end, and then you start approaching it, you start tackling it. Why do you read it from beginning to end? Well, because you've already then filed sort of this pace back in the back of your mind, so that when you go back to prepare, your mind is already working with those things that you've read in minute. And a lot of times recipes are written by people, and sometimes people are better cooks than recipe writers. So heaven forbid the recipe isn't written as organized and methodical as you'd like, and some little tidbit towards the end is sort of something you wish you had known at the beginning. But again, read the thing from beginning to end, and then just think about it. Maybe if you have to take notes, take notes. And I personally like finding recipes on the internet. I'll think of something I want to do, find what I think to be like 2 to 3 best takes that are out there. And for something like beef stew, I mean, they're all going to look pretty similar, basic components. And then I just like to get out my little, you can use a notebook, or I have this little recipe book that came with blank pages to where you can write down your own and add to it. I like to write it out and sort of make it my own, because at that point, I've got my web pages open, I'm sitting there writing it down on my piece of paper, and I'm pulling the best parts from, the 2 or 3 that I'm referencing, and kind of creating my own thing at that point. But also, I prefer to reference a piece of paper the old school way while I'm cooking, versus pulling my phone out and opening the web browser and going, oh, where's that page again? That's just, again, very Venus and Virgo. It's like, let's do the preparatory work. Let's get everything in order before we really lean in to the creativity, to where the artistic license kind of comes in. Because then, as I'm cooking it for the first time, I might get this brilliant idea to go, oh man, I didn't go out to my rosemary plant out there, and let me toss some of that in with the beef. And what I'll want to do after I've done it is go back to my little piece of paper and do a little notation. Like, oh yeah, don't forget, maybe go and check on the rosemary, see if you can get some good clippings, or for this, definitely fresh thyme. About to go out there in a minute and clip some, because dried thyme is fine. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I guess another Venus in Virgo rule of thumb. But fresh thyme, there really is nothing like it, especially for something like this, to where the part to where it's hands-on over the stove is about 30 minutes. But then the real magic happens when it's in the oven. So we're just chopping our onions. Called for 1 onion. I'm an onion fan, and honestly, when something's going to be in the oven for this long, I plan on dividing it up among households and multiple meals for myself. I like to kind of, I don't know, sometimes you might even say double. I often go double on the vegetables. To me, there's never enough carrots based on what the recipe is calling for. I just love carrots. And so if a recipe is calling for 3 pounds of beef stew tips, or cubes. But the only thing on sale at the store on the manager special was the 1.5 pound one. Well, I'm going to buy that, and then I'm going to double the carrots and the onions. And that's my preference. So you can do it your own way. Again, it's nearly impossible to mess up. That's the beauty of it. So I've got my onions right here. And because I have read the recipe ahead of time, instead of having my separate bowl, my smaller bowl of onions and like a separate bowl with the carrots, I have already become familiar with the fact that the carrots and the onions are all going to go in together. So got your big prep bowl. So even things as small as getting out the right equipment to work with, a lot of recipes, it's stages. So if you've combined a lot of the vegetables, you've already sort of messed up the process. But not with beef stew, at least not with this. So here you've seen me do carrot prep plenty of times. And I've got some carrots left over from the prep I think I did a week ago. But I've been using them all week in my salads. And because it's not going to be nearly enough for the amount of carrots I want, we are going to prepare some more. Now, one of my friends told me when she was pointing out, like, hey, just FYI, not everyone is as confident in the kitchen in working with certain things as you are. So you might take for granted that, you know, when you're preparing carrots in front of people and you've already peeled them and you're just chopping them, some people are like, okay, but what about the step before that? And I thought it was a good point. You know, I don't want to take for granted people's skill levels. And as a matter of fact, I've talked about in the last video, the start where you are, which I do want to make a series. If that's something you're interested in, start where you are, especially in the kitchen. These little things that I'm just throwing in there about tips for beginners. I would love to know what question that you have that you feel you always want to ask, but you feel stupid, or you're like, well, I don't know, everyone knows how to do that. Or even if it's something that you think is obvious, and there's no such thing as a dumb question, because otherwise no one would learn anything. I think that is a big problem in the world, to be honest, is people thinking they have to smile and nod, and then they proceed without being equipped the way that they've kind of let on that they are. And the whole time you've got people around that are just more than willing to lend their expertise. Some people have very limited expertise, and so if your question happens to fall into one of those limited categories, they'll be glad to help you. And me, for example, let me go back to Virgo, my moon. So in your chart, that represents your emotive. It's one of the luminaries. The sun and the moon are the luminaries, but we call them planets for, you know, simplicity and for purposes of just a quick reference in astrology. Your moon is pretty much your communicative style. I think it's a hugely important aspect in anyone's chart, especially in the areas of interpersonal communications. I mean, the areas to where so many of us find our trouble stem from, right? Absence of communication, whether in the professional sense or personal life. It's often we make assumptions about people's knowledge levels, or make assumptions about what they already know, make assumptions what they should know, and then we approach them based on these assumptions, and the whole time it's just compounding assumptions from two people or more that ends up in conflict that could have just been avoided by someone stopping and going, hey, can you explain that a little bit more? Or hey, can you elaborate on that? Or hey, let's rewind and go back to the other step. I don't understand what you mean. So Virgo loves information. As a Virgo moon, my love language is information sharing. And so here I am on this channel sharing information to nobody in particular, yet everyone, because you could come across this video tonight, you could come across it next year, you could come across it in 5 years, and there will always be someone out there who has never prepared fresh garlic before. There will always be someone out there who has found themselves in a tough spot in life for the first time, and they're just having to kind of navigate things, and they don't maybe have a support system. They don't have many sources to go to for candid talk. I don't really know what the future is going to be like on the internet. I do think it's not going to be for the weary. I do think it's going to require a degree of discernment. Discernment is a word that we would attach to Venus and Virgo. And by that I mean Virgo doesn't just look at something at face value and go, okay, Virgo's going to do the homework. Virgo's going to look it up. Virgo's going to ask questions. Virgo, especially Venus and Virgo, loves relationships and beauty just like the next person, but Venus and Virgo is going to use discernment, prepare, ask questions, make a list. Because there's no reason to be ashamed of not. I mean, who knows everything? Don't trust anybody that acts like they have nothing new to learn. Those people are actually the most concerning, in my opinion. But we all have something we can learn. Sometimes it's just by seeing how someone else does something. Some people out there do carrots and they have their own just system because maybe your mom cooked or your dad cooked or a sister or brother or someone cooked. And most likely the way that they did it is probably the way you do it. That just makes sense, especially if something as mundane as preparing carrots. But maybe you come across this video and you're like, I never thought of opening a plastic bag right here and just doing the carrot peeling directly in the bag so that cleanup can be a little bit more efficient. It's extremely Virgo of me. Is streamlining things that I don't want this part to kind of be an energy suck. I don't want this to drain me of my energy. I want the enthusiasm to be still there and going when I'm turning on the stove and heating the olive oil in the pot, and I'm really starting to vibe with the sensory things and letting the creativity take over. So I do hope that maybe just seeing me do these things more regularly, if you were somebody that grew up without seeing anyone do these things, I totally get why you would feel apprehensive, because I was talking about this with a neighbor who's a therapist, and how a lot of her clients, especially during the pandemic, were younger people, and it's like they would get so behind in their lives, schoolwork, but other things would just pile up, and it's like they became so overwhelmed because they didn't know where to start. They often lacked that one good example of where to begin, where, especially if you had, what if your parents, by the time you were old enough to need these sort of skills, if you had parents that were kind of really on their game and just had already streamlined their lives, well, you might argue that you're kind of at a disadvantage. I mean, I like seeing people in a state of mastery. I love seeing people at the top of their game, but I don't know. Arguably, the best lesson is to watch struggle. Watch how an adult that has more life experience than you and that has something to offer, and just leading by example. I want to see how they get through periods of struggle personally, because in my life, there are many periods in my young adult life to where that would have helped me tremendously. And I just hope that maybe this channel, as I'm going through sort of a very slow process of overcoming a very rough period in my life, I can share little pieces of that experience as we progress and paint the picture fully of how these little rituals, as simple as cutting up the carrots and cutting up the onions and getting everything in its place, it really helped build my confidence for larger things in life that I was going to have to tackle in this newfound reality that I'm living in. And when you feel overwhelmed and you don't know where to start where you are. You have to eat. And this is why I keep coming back to food, because there are going to be so many things that we're not going to be able to control externally in our personal relationships, with work, but with the outside world. I mean, we're all living in it, and we all see, we feel helpless. And the one thing that doesn't change is that we're all still here together, and we all still need to eat. We all still need to carry on with sometimes the limited tool set that we do have as we're trying to pick our own lives up and share with each other, help one another, because you're going to be at a different place than I am, and my neighbor is going to be in a different place, even if she's going through her own struggle that I don't know about. We're all navigating these things, often unseen, and we all have a skill set to offer. And if you think that you don't, I'm gonna disagree. I don't really know what your skill set is, um, but I guarantee you there's something that you have a better than average ability to navigate, to master, to communicate to others, to show, to lead by example. Then you realize, like, maybe you've never thought about it, so maybe that's why you can't think of yours right now. But getting in the kitchen and seeing where you land with these basic preparatory things, I don't know, maybe it's a good place to find out. So when I go back to Venus in Virgo, and you realize I've talked a lot about health and systems and routine, and I've shared with you that I am a Virgo moon and that my love language is very much the sharing of information. The more you watch these videos, the more you will actually start to understand these archetypes, and I'm going to cover them all. Just because you're getting to know me, and if nothing else, just the videos that are available to you and the material that I cover and the way that I communicate these things, you already know more about the sign of Virgo than you realize. And you know more about Venus than other planets, I would say, because I've mentioned Venus more than once. You know that Friday is Venus Day. And Venus in Virgo, while maybe it gets sort of lost in the logistics at times, and it needs to maybe be reminded by another archetype in its proximity, like, hey, relax, like, we'll figure the rest out together. It's a very good balance for the Venus in Virgo energy. But if you're sitting by yourself with the Venus in Virgo transit, like I am right now, you will find these productive little areas to channel that energy. If cooking isn't going to be it for you, maybe this is a good time to tackle your closet organization project, because maybe you're like, I want to update my wardrobe, and winter's coming and I want to donate a bunch of clothes, and kind of want to streamline my wardrobe. And that's something that I've thought about many times, but this would be a great energy this weekend to do that under. Be a great energy to tackle that pile of mail or pile of papers or pile of things you've been meaning to get around to, and creative ideas, and maybe getting out a little notepad and writing out your thoughts instead of just letting them swirl around, hoping you'll grab one and get to it. Maybe write down, these are the things that I would like to accomplish to make my life a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more conducive to creativity, and sitting there and accomplishing things that often we just kind of say, oh, well, I'll get to that next year. Going to the garden, that's That's often what I have to do, is sometimes just sit there and go, okay, what are the things that I absolutely would like to get done organization wise, like cleaning out these pots and rinsing them out and making a stack, uh, getting these perennials or shrubs trimmed, uh, just tidying up things so that I can maybe justify one last trip to the garden center to indulge in a little bit of Venusian delight. So that's kind of my little rule of thumb, is take care of what you have. Get your things in order. Get your thoughts in order. Get your plans in order. Get your hopes and aspirations for the remainder of the year in order. Get out your prettiest little pen or pencil. Get out your favorite stationery. Very Virgo. Write it down. Sit in front of your favorite TV show, your guilty pleasure show, with your notepad, a little clipboard or something. Just jot things down. Don't overthink it. So I do hope that this Venus and Virgo lesson has offered you a little bit of something, and maybe an idea how to channel that energy in the spirit of getting in pace with nature, getting in alignment. Get something done for yourself. You'll feel more confident just by having kept this little promise to yourself. Something for you. Get you in order, so that as life throws these things at us that we're just trying to, these fast pitches that we're just trying to sometimes duck, and then other times bat, and other times just run away from. Get you in order, because only the best version of you is going to be able to effectively navigate what the future has in store for all of us. And that story is still being written. So I do hope that you take care of yourself this weekend and embrace the Venus and Virgo energy. Until next time.